So my mother's side is Sephardic Jewish, and for Sephardic Jews, it's a very, very different atmosphere in Israel Palestine, especially in the early years of the state.
Okay.
In 1948, from around 1960, there was a lot of oppression towards Sephardic and Mizrahi Jews, and that happened to my family. And
And by
so
the way, what does Sephardic even mean? I don't really even know what that means.
that's a great question. A lot of people talk about Israel Palestine, but they don't really have the
Yeah.
terminology or historical basis. So I need to catch myself sometimes and explain these terms. Sephard in Hebrew means Spain. Sepharad means Spain. And so the Jews who were expelled from Spain in 1492, they went to the Ottoman Empire, they went to North Africa. They are Sephardic Jews. Mizrahi means Eastern in Hebrew, right? And so they're the Jews that weren't in Spain, but they've always been in the Middle East, right? In Iraq and these other places. And so Sephardic and Mizrahi Jews are not Ashkenazi Jews. Ashkenazi Jews are those who were in Central and Eastern Europe.
Okay.
They're the browner Jews, the ones with a little more melanin. But that's my mother's side. And they had a very tough time in the early years of Israel. There was a lot of Orientalist hatred by the Ashkenazi establishment, government, and leadership. And it got so bad, many of them left. A lot of them grew up in shanty towns. They worked the poorest jobs. That if Palestinians weren't working those jobs, that it was typically Sephardic and Mizrahi Jews. And
Okay.
so Sephardic and Mizrahi Jews are very interesting politically. Some of them are the most extreme Zionists you will meet. Right, Ben Gvir, he's an Iraqi Jew, right, and he is as far right as they come. And the reason for that is they have a lot of animosity towards Arabs and Palestinians. They believe that Arabs expelled them from Iraq and all these Arab countries, and they want to take out their anger on Arabs, and they do that through Palestinians. And to add insult to injury, because they were excluded by the quote unquote leftist Ashkenazi political movements in the early state of Israel, right? Think David Ben Gurion, he was a socialist, right? That was primarily Ashkenazi Jews leading that. They gravitated towards the more right wing, right, movements in Israel, right? Those of Menachem Begin, right? Those
Yeah.
of the Lehi leaders, right? Those were the political movements they more gravitated towards. And so they from the beginning were very right wing. And because of that, they had a lot of animosity towards Palestinians. But at the same time, they had animosity towards the Ashkenazi leftist establishment. And so Mizrahi Jews, they can go in either direction. They can either be really far right or they can be really far left. There was a movement in the early years of Israel called the Mizrahi Black Panther campaign, basically, based on the American,
Wow.
right? And they really took inspiration from them and brought that to Israel Palestine to seek their own liberation. So very cool, diverse history there. But that's the fold where my mother is coming from. Definitely that vein of history.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Okay. All right. Let's talk about like campus life and really what your generation is feeling right now, because it's interesting that obviously when I went to college, I mean, politics were just nowhere on no one's radar. And I know right now politics are probably not on some people's radar that are attending college, like the frat life people and things like that probably don't care. But I will say there's a lot of people that really do care. And like, obviously, all the protests, that took place last summer and all that. I know you guys were a part of that. Is politics really, and I guess I should say world affairs and what's going on, particularly, obviously, genocide in Gaza, maybe Russia, Ukraine? Like, is this stuff that's really prevalent on campus right now?
I'll take this one, I
Yeah.
suppose, because I'm the one on campus
Yeah.
right
You're on
now.
campus.
So
Yeah.
yeah, well, it definitely these issues are very relevant on college campuses, and I've always said that I think that campuses should be the bastions of free speech, right? And that's what we partly do at Atina, having these conversations. I would say right now, at least in this moment, of course, this differs by the state, let's say. So at UT in the state of Texas, one of the biggest issues right now is with the redistricting that's happening,
Yeah.
that just passed in some of the Texas legislature. So that's been sort of, I think, the more dominant trend for right now. However, if there's any issue over the last 2 years that has struck the most people, it's definitely Israel, Palestine, and specifically the genocide in Gaza. Even Russia, Ukraine, for that matter. Yes, people, of course, talk about it, they care about it, but this is an issue to where the United States is not actively funding a genocide, for example.
Got it.
And
Got
so
it.
people can have their views on Russia, Ukraine, and NATO expansion and all this stuff, and I'm here to have that dialogue anytime. But the fact of the matter is that Gaza right now, it's just so apparent because it's impossible to avoid. And, frankly, I think that people, when they're on social media, I think that people should see what's happening. I think that as uncomfortable as it is to see children who are bloodied and limbs blown off, this is the reality of what's happened. And this is American tax dollars, right? I mean, and this is what we've seen, I think now it's a growing trend across both aisles, sorry, both sides of the aisle here in terms of where we see the American Israeli relationship taking place. That the left has always sort of been more in the pro-Palestine camp, but now it's, I think, accelerated even more, including a lot of progressive Jewish voices who I think may have previously been still more kind of on the Zionist side of things, to the point now where even on the right, of course, we've talked many times about the sort of isolationist approach, this Tucker Carlson, even Marjorie Taylor Greene approach of saying, hey, I don't want America funding the deaths of tens of thousands of children in Gaza. Someone like Thomas Massey, who I think has been a superstar, really. And honestly, I would not be surprised if they really try to oust him as hard as possible, which I think they're really going to do. They're going to push him out as fast as they can.
I think so too.
So
I think so
yeah,
too.
they already
You
are.
know what's interesting about the right and the left right now? Marjorie Taylor Greene. Yeah, I give her a lot of credit. She's making a lot of noise now. She is. She's making a lot of noise. I give her credit. But then it's funny. It's like, where are the Democrats now? They're not making noise. You know what I mean? You've got Marjorie Taylor Greene being the loudest voice of what are we doing in Israel? Why do we keep giving them money? Why do we keep doing this? And then I look at the entire Democratic Party and I'm like, hey, where are you guys? Let alone, where's Barack Obama? Where's Joe Biden? Where's Kamala Harris? Where's Nancy Pelosi? Where's Chuck Schumer? Hakeem Jeffries, forget it. That dude is just like, he's so on the payroll. Him and Cory Booker, those guys are so on the payroll. It's insane. But, it's like, I was having this discussion. Go
Can't
ahead.
even get Bernie Sanders to say the word genocide. I mean, let alone that list. We can't even get Bernie to say the G word, man. It's
You know
terrible.
what? That's another great point. I mean, Bernie will curse out Netanyahu all day long, but that's kind of where it ends. And you know what's funny? I even found myself over the progression of this for many months. I was always like blaming Netanyahu. I was like Netanyahu, Netanyahu, Netanyahu. But honestly, if you really want to call a spade, and if you want to have real talk, you got to scope it above him. It's not just him. Yes, he is the centerpiece and he's the spokesperson. And really, he's the central figure that's catching all the heat. And all of that's by design, but it's more than that. It's absolutely more than that.
You got to go to the root
Okay,
cause. You got to go to the
let,
root
let,
cause of Zionism.
yeah, the root cause, exactly, the root cause. And let me ask you this, and Elijah, you answer first. I mean, do you think at the end of the day, is it just the land? Do they just want to expel, whether that's through genociding or relocation or whatever? Do they just want all Palestinians out of? I mean, the West Bank's the crown jewel. You and I have talked about this before, but out of the West Bank, out of Gaza, and do they want that to be just a pure Jewish state for the sake of having one? What do you think the root cause is?
Yeah, I mean, the Zionist movement early on understood the primary struggle in this land is over demographics, right? If you're going to have a piece of territory and call it a Jewish state, you need a solid demographic Jewish majority. And as soon as you annex Gaza and the West Bank, that's an additional 5 million Palestinians on top of the 2 million Palestinian Arabs who have citizenship in Israel alongside 7 million Jews in the land. It'll be a 7 to 7 figure, right? So if you want
Yeah.
to have more territory and call this a Jewish state, you have to expel. You have to expel. It's the only way to get this done. And so, day one, what did the defense minister of Israel say was going to happen in Gaza? No food, no water, no electricity. The intent was starvation off the bat, right? That was the goal. What's the purpose of starvation, right? To get people to leave, to either mass kill them or to get them to leave, right? Typically both. So, in my eyes, the only goal of the government at this point is to expel Palestinians. It's to annex and expel and to get as few Palestinians in the land as possible in order to have that solid demographic majority. And in the West Bank, it's even harder, right? It's much harder to get these Palestinians to leave. And we're seeing a slower approach, a slower burn approach. So, for example, there's what just happened in Taipei, right? The persecution of many Palestinian Christians in this little village that is the biblical town of Ephraim. And the settler violence there, the reason for that settler violence is to scare Palestinians, to get them to immigrate, right? Because that's the only way they'll leave. It's much harder for the IDF to come in and just mass expel because the world would get very angry, right? So these little episodes of settler violence with the intent for immigration is what they're going for. And it's what they have done over the past 50,
Yeah.
years in the West Bank. So the struggle over demographics has been the central focus of Zionism since its inception. Theodor Herzl, David Ben-Gurion, they understood that we need a Jewish demographic majority. So in 1948, what did that mean? That meant the expulsion of 800,000 Palestinians from Israel proper, right? The first Nakba, right? But that's continued ever since, right? After the annexation of the West Bank, there has been a complete impetus to try and get Palestinians to move. And after October 7th, they had the best green light in the world, right? To expel 2 million Palestinians from Gaza. And so off the
Yeah.
bat, starvation was their weapon. Physical genocide was also another weapon, right? Every tool at their disposal to decrease the Palestinian population in order to ensure a solid Jewish demographic majority and domination of the land from the river to the sea. That is their goal.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, okay. All right, Jan, let me ask you this question. I've asked Elijah and I have talked about this before. I don't think I've ever convinced him, but I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. I swear I think Hamas is fake. I think and if not fake, I think they are a creation of Netanyahu and Likud party and the United States and everybody to have a boogeyman, to have an enemy, have somebody that they can blame for everything. Like, I got a flat tire the other day, I can blame Hamas for that. It's like somebody to blame for everything. In order to do it, a couple things. One is that keeps the United States spigot of money, $3.8 billion a year, able to be sent because, hey, we've got to help them defend against Hamas. Secondly, you can't just kill innocent civilians if there's not a underlying thing to be going after, and that's what Hamas is. And the third reason I think that is, like, it's like, where are they? Like, nobody even knows who's leading Hamas. Their entire leadership now has been wiped out 3 times. Like, honestly, I bet you if I went on Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Megyn Kelly, any talk show, Fox, anything, and I said, name the leader of Hamas, nobody knows. Nobody even knows who's running anything. They don't have a spokesperson. It's not like I love the Houthis. When they blow something up, they have that one Yemenis dude who comes out and he's like, and it's like, it's hilarious, but dude's the spokesperson. It's somebody that I can see who's a Houthi. I don't know, man. And when I say fake, I'm saying I think Netanyahu's cut a deal with a certain group of people, and then they're the ones that are the quote unquote Hamas. But I don't know. What do you think?
Well, it wouldn't be shocking. I mean, listen, what we know for a fact, of course, is that Netanyahu did prop up Hamas. We know this is as true as anything else. This is the same Netanyahu who took money himself from Qatar. And so it obviously adds up that he is somebody who needs Hamas for his own political viability. We
Yeah.
have Hamas in Gaza. That way we can do this. Number one, we can split up the West Bank from Gaza politically. But then number two, we can always use that as an excuse that we don't have a viable partner for peace in Gaza, right? It's the same reason why, of course, they understand that Hamas is it's something that grew as a resistance movement, but now has been kept, I think, by Netanyahu as really an Israeli asset to say that, hey, we're going to use these guys as our excuse to bulldoze and ethnically cleanse. Because you're right, all the main leaders who we've talked about, Yahya Sinwar, his brother Mohammed Sinwar, Mohammed.They, Aruri, all of these guys who have been killed, who we know are dead, Ismail Haniya, all of these guys are dead. But the problem is, and I said this before, I think when Yahya Sinwar was killed, it was a big blunder by Israel because they knew at that point when they killed him that a lot of their excuses to kill even more had now been erased. You got to keep him alive so you can keep propping up some reasons to attack. When they
Yeah.
killed him, I would not be surprised if some people at the top of the chain were saying, "What are you guys doing? Why are you taking this guy out? We need this
Yeah.
guy for
Yeah.
our assets."
Yeah.
This is not even much of a conspiracy at this point. And what I will say, I'll actually go back to one thing really quick. We're talking kind of about what Israel wants, what Israelis want. The fact of the matter is that Netanyahu and his government, they can use fear, of course. And, there's polling that's been released. I just posted about this on my Instagram today. And this was polling that came out about 2 weeks ago. And it was asking Jewish Israelis what they thought about the starvation in Gaza. And there were 4 options. It asked, how concerned are you? How concerned are you? Are you very concerned, somewhat concerned, not very concerned, or not concerned at all? 56% of Israelis said they were not at all concerned. And then an additional nearly 30% said they said not very concerned. Only 20% said they were either very concerned or somewhat concerned. this is not just a Netanyahu thing.
Yeah.
There's a reason these guys get elected, right? I mean, they're not just being nominated out of thin air here. And so there's a bigger issue going on. But Hamas, it's just, I think you're definitely onto something there because it absolutely has posed fear into Israeli society. And the more fearful Israeli society, the better it is for Israel's interest. They have more
Yeah.
excuses that way.
Yeah,
It's
you
that
always
simple.
have to have fear. Maybe you nailed it. Maybe they started off as a true resistance organization in 1987 when they were formed and all that. And then maybe over the years, Netanyahu, who's God, that dude has been in the game forever. I mean, I've said this before, I'm going to say it again. I think the guy's one of if not the most disgusting human being on the planet, but he's a generational talent politician. He just unfortunately is. And, maybe he went to them years ago and cut a deal and said, okay, hey, we're going to let you guys keep going. We're going to let the Qatar money flow. You'll be fine. You'll be taken care of and you can do whatever you want. But here's the game. Oh man, I don't know. All right, let's shift a little to New York politics. And Elijah, why don't you give us your thoughts? Like Zoran Mondani, I mean, this guy's obviously everywhere. I think he really put himself on the map in that debate, the Democratic candidate debate, where they basically went and asked, and I might even insert it into the podcast here, but they asked all the candidates, as New York City mayor, what would be your first place to visit or your first something in office, and everyone was like Israel, 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 and then he's like, I'm not going anywhere, I'm staying in New York and I want to handle the New York thing. Anyway, I thought that was amazing, but honestly that's all I really know about him. So Elijah, give us kind of, I know you even worked on his campaign, but I mean, just give us a crash course in him. What's he all about? What do you think and give me the good and the bad, if there is any bad.
Yeah, and since I worked on his campaign, I might get in trouble for sharing anything bad, but I will say you hit it spot on the head. There were two main issues that I think were on the ballot in this election. The first was Israel, right? The first was Israel-Palestine, and we saw a resounding pushback against AIPAC, against the pro-Israel political establishment through the election of Zoran. More than anything else, that's what Zoran indicates. The second issue was affordability, right? New York is one of the most expensive cities in the world. Basic things like food, busing, all these basic concepts are unaffordable for everyday Americans in New York. And so, more than anything, he simply hammered home that message that I'm going to do my most as a politician to make your everyday life easier. Free busing, right? City-run grocery stores to make your fruits, your vegetables, your chickens, everything cheaper for you, right? Whatever I can do in my power as mayor, I will do to make your life easier and more affordable. In terms of the Israel issue, I think that, especially amongst our generation, amongst people below the age of 40, that was why they were so energized at Zoran. Finally, someone came out and pushed back against the establishment and finally said, I'm not taking APAC money. Not only am I not taking APAC money, I am going to stand up and say, I want to put the citizens that I'm representing before a foreign interest. We love that, right? Finally, someone's
Yeah.
actually looking out for us, right? Which the boomers apparently can't comprehend or grasp. And when I was working for Zoran, it's actually a very interesting story. I phone banked for him. So I was calling New Yorkers to advocate for Zoran.
Mm,
And New York's a very Jewish city. It's the most
yeah.
Jewish city in the world. And most of the people I was calling were Jewish. And a lot of the pushback I got against Zoran was from older Jewish individuals. Younger Jewish individuals actually were loving him. They're like, yeah, I'm going to go out and vote for him. But it was the older Jewish demographic, I would say above 60 years old, that really gave me the most pushback. And one woman, I think she was probably an 80-plus-year-old Jewish woman. She told me, this was a verbatim quote, that I'm, quote, no better than a Palestinian by working for him. She knew I was Jewish. And the first thing I said back to her was, well, to me, that's a compliment, right? The Palestinian people are the bravest people on the planet. So I really love the fact that you're comparing me to such an admirable people. So thank you for that. And then I hung up the phone because I'm like, this woman is beyond the pale.
Man, she must have gone crazy. So when you phone bank, I mean, what is literally you're calling people and talk us through that? Like, is pretend you just called me. What does that go like?
Yeah. And so if you're a New Yorker, I would typically ask you, what are your primary concerns before I even touch on Zoran, right? And I'm saying, in a political candidate, what would you like to see? What is your go-to issue? right? And so if you mention Israel, I would craft a speech for that to say, like, look, this is what Zoroan's approach is to Israel. And most of the time, it's not a positive view of Israel. Most candidates have. If it's, oh, I can't afford X, Y, and Z, I would give the step by step playbook of how Zoran is addressing that issue. If your issue is housing, I'm going to tell you his plan for housing, how to make housing more affordable. If it's busing, right? You can't afford busing in the city, right? I'm telling you his plan for busing. If it's basic stuff like halal food, right? He has a plan to decrease halal food by $2 by simply giving ownership of the actual carts to halal shop owners, right? And that would actually decrease the average dish at a halal restaurant in New York by $2, right? Everything that you think is important, I'm trying to spill out to you that Zoran is representing in his campaign. So no matter what your issue is, Ray, I know you're big on Israel, so I would give you statements by Zoran about how he's very critical of Israel, how he's trying to put New York first. That's the message I would craft to you. Yeah.
And so these people, it's so funny. It's like my concept of New Yorkers. I can't even believe they take the calls.
Yeah.
Like, I
I
would
know.
think they'd be like, "Shut why the fuck are you calling me?" And just hang up immediately. That's hilarious.
Want the full truth? Watch the full Deep Shallow Dive interview next. And hit subscribe if you're done with narratives and ready to call a spade a spade.